Coin locker babies. Something you've probably heard about at least once in your life. Coin locker babies tend to be only understood at a surface level by a lot of Western people in Western cultures, and people tend not to really realize how many factors there really are when it comes to these coin locker baby cases, hell, even child abandonment in Japan in general. For people who are born in Western culture, it honestly just seems like more of a confusing thing, and we tend to misunderstand it a lot as some more like a true crime sort of thing, rather than this mix of social, economic, and even political factors. I mean, if you're some weeb and saw a single music video by Maritu, the coin locker baby one, you'd probably just think, oh, it's just crazy mom shit, postpartum psychosis or something, right? But it's really not. I mean, that can factor in, but it's really not all the time, at least. Again, it can be mental, but we'll talk about that more later. So I went ahead and did a lot of research on understanding the full scope of coin locker babies, and honestly child abandonment and abuse in general, and all of that stuff in Japan. This video, by the way, is going to be extremely heavy. We are going to be discussing a lot of really heavy topics: child abuse, infanticide, really disturbing cases, and a lot of dark themes overall. Please, please, please be advised that this might not be for you. If you find those things triggering, honestly, I don't, no shame or anything like that. That is very okay. That's valid, because it's dark and it's just very distressing. So yeah, please keep that in mind. Anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. This one took a lot longer than I thought to make, as I had to do a lot of research. It was just a lot of work in general. I had to really make sure this video was as formal as it could be. So yeah, this is probably going to be one of my most serious videos. No jokes, barely any jokes at least. So yeah, I'm going to keep it pretty serious for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Alright, let's talk about it. Alright, so to understand all of this, we need to understand what the actual coin locker baby phenomenon is. What was it? Well, just know I'll be diving into the causes and a bunch of the surrounding factors that actually cause coin locker babies, and honestly just child abandonment in Japan in general, but we'll stick with just what the coin locker babies are in an isolated, like just what they are. So basically, a coin locker baby is when a parent, usually a mother, puts a living baby or the corpse of a baby inside a coin-operated locker. Now, coin-operated lockers are more common in Eastern countries like China, Japan, and Korea. Basically, it usually tends to be also in a subway, by the way. You put stuff in there and then pay for the amount of time that you want to keep it in there, and then take the key with you and then come back and unlock it and take your stuff back. Something like that. So, a mother will put a baby in there, usually in a plastic bag or something. Sometimes it's already dead and has been, usually commonly, it's most likely just asphyxiated. It was asphyxiated to death. Or sometimes it's even alive. And they will just put it in the coin locker, pay for like a day or two, and leave it in there. Now, there are a few, I guess, variations of this with regards to how they charge this. So, for example, sometimes mothers will actually leave a stillborn in the locker, meaning the child is already dead. They didn't kill it. So the thing is that they're still charged for abandonment. I mean, they did just leave a corpse in a locker, and that's obviously not okay. So yeah, they're still charged for that. They can also kill the child, like I said, usually most likely asphyxiation, and then they put it in the plastic bag and leave it there. If the child was just killed like a day after birth or something, the mother isn't charged with abuse, but it is still considered a homicide. Sometimes, in fact, cases will even have it where like authorities find the umbilical cord still attached to the child. It's very disturbing. And sometimes if the child is killed maybe a few days after birth or even a week or two, it is considered homicide and abuse. And finally, if you drop the kid off in the locker, just straight up, still living, not kill it or anything like that, the mother is just charged with severe neglect. And I feel like that, that's a bit of an understatement, but there are old laws in Japan that still kind of force these charges to be the way they are, because it's just how it works. Now, these cases really blew up from the 70s to the 90s, and from the 80s to the 90s, there was about 191 cases of this. Sorry, I'm still a little sick, so yeah. Anyways, there were about 191 cases from the 80s to the 90s, which accounted for about 6% of the infanticides for that decade. But in the 70s, it was a lot more rampant, but I wasn't able to find any specific statistics for it, but it was definitely a lot worse from what I have seen. The reason this was even popular to begin with is because you could keep a child in there for a while, and eventually nobody's going to try and open the locker, and hopefully the breadcrumb trail leading back to the mother, who most of the time asphyxiated the child or left it in there alive, God forbid, would, that breadcrumb would disappear because the body would, rot. It would give you a lot of time to, I guess, get away with it. And in addition, putting it in the locker it was crowded in these subways where these coin lockers were stationed, making it a lot less suspicious when you do this. And also, you might be wondering why I'm talking about coin locker babies in general. Well, as a whole, it's kind of what got the ball rolling for, change in Japan with regards to child abuse and abandonment. And in general, encapsulates Japanese child abandonment due to, publicity and all of that stuff. Oh, and I forgot to mention, of course, mothers weren't just abandoning children in only these lockers. They were doing it, in all kinds of places. I'll bring this up later, probably. It's in my script. But, they would do it in cardboard boxes, bathroom stalls, shopping malls, parks, even bicycle baskets. I'm gonna say this exact thing later, but yeah, they'll do it literally everywhere. The reason that they would do coin lockers, though, is because you could easily ensure that nobody would find it for at least bare minimum a few days. So yeah, anyways, on to the next section. Alright, so you might be wondering, why the hell does this even happen in the first place? Why do mothers do this to their children in such an awful, horrific way? Why do they leave their bodies in a coin locker? Well, I'm going to tell it to you straight. Apparently, infanticide and child abandonment, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but it's shockingly common and happens in a lot of brutal ways, not just coin lockers. Again, mothers suffocate their kids and then just hide them, or sometimes they let them starve in an alleyway. Or there was an infamous case where a three-year-old starved in a cardboard box, and that one's interesting because it also kind of comments on misogyny in Japan and in a way feminist movements. But I'm going to mention that later, but yeah. So why does abandonment happen in general in Japan? Well, there are actually a few factors: age, income and poverty, and the taboo of sex, all of which are under this kind of general umbrella for Japanese shame culture, you could say. The first one I'll be talking about is poverty. It's the easiest to talk about. You see, raising a child in Japan is really not cheap, especially with the recent wave of inflation that hit Japan after COVID. For example, I don't know if this is dated or not, but it can cost anywhere from $3,500 to $7,000 to have a delivery, for example. Like that's $3,500 bare minimum. And raising a kid can cost anywhere from 28 million yen to 63 million for the bare minimum, not including schooling, toys. This is for bare necessities, food, and maybe clothes. So yeah, in general, this has caused record low birth rates in Japan, and it's only getting lower actually, and the rates of infanticide have gotten higher because of this, because people literally can't afford to have kids. Now you might be wondering, why don't they give them the adoption? I'll bring that up later, but less people can afford being a parent in general, right? So why not use public welfare systems? Japan has these systems and programs to help these, right? Well, you see, this is more of a social thing, but I mentioned this earlier. There's shame, and there's some kind of level of shame that actually comes from relying on these public welfare systems and programs. In addition, there's shame in just being poor and in poverty in general. So obviously, trying to prevent relying on public welfare, these parents will kill their kids. They don't want to be seen as shameful. It gives you a really bad look, and it can make your life actually a lot harder in Japan. So yeah, and signing up your kids for adoption is also seen as a shameful act, and even just abortion in general. But that's more of a sex taboo thing. So and I'll actually be talking about that next. So yeah, so let's just jump into it. What about sex and taboo in Japan? Well, the taboo of sex is, I just mentioned it, literally just mentioned it, but I mean, sex in general isn't probably that taboo, but unplanned, unwanted, and even teen pregnancies, those unfortunately are considered shameful and taboo. And God forbid, there's a rape, something like rape happens, that still fits under this umbrella, even if it's not your fault. It's awful, but anyways, having a child you never planned has this level of shame to it. And in general, adoption and abortion, which by the way is also very expensive, has this level of shame. And adoption, mind you, they log all your info normally. That's what happens when you sign a child up for adoption. They take all your info and are like, okay, this is where you live, this is your name, all of this sort of stuff. So if your child who you put in adoption ever tries to find you again, they could easily, they could tell the world, hey, you had an unplanned child and you signed it up for adoption. And that's actually really bad. That can ruin your reputation, leading to things like job loss and, just shame in general on you. So yeah, that's a bigger issue. Finally, age, which seems pretty obvious because you're like, oh yeah, teen pregnancies, right? But in actuality, it's a pretty wide range from what I've read, anywhere from 18 to 40, or even younger than 18, which is awful to think about. Now, the problem is that each age group, like their, teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, they generally all kind of have their own reason for doing this that is specific to that age group. For example, teen pregnancy should be obvious as they lack money, and there's also the stigma of shame, but and also not to mention they have school, and school is just a whole, school is very stressful in Japan. It's something that absolutely decides your life. You can't turn back if you ever fail it. That's another thing as well. So there's not a lot of time. People in their 40s honestly I couldn't really find why people in their 40s could have so much shame around having this unplanned child or having a kid like this. But it gets really complicated, and you can try and maybe research more. I wasn't able to find anything, but in general, and if you're a single mom, totally forgot. If you're a single mom, that's also extremely shameful and extremely difficult. It mixes in with the poverty thing. You can kind of see how these things are already kind of mixing it together. And again, it's another reason that mothers kill their children, unfortunately. And the thing is you'd think, it's mostly single mothers that do this, right? Well, actually, it's kind of a mix again. A lot of married couples do it too. Well, it's not like they do it together, but the mother will do it, and then, it kind of goes from there. So there are just a lot of factors with regards to age. Alright, so misogyny was not explicitly stated as one of the reasons, but I do think it has something to do with overall just everything. And I mentioned it earlier, obviously, and well, the reason I did was because, during a civil rights movement in Asia during the 60s and 70s, people within the movement, when they were seeing the coin locker babies kind of appear, the cases appear, they said it could be a reaction to being forced into some relationships and forced to have kids and forced to conform to misogynistic and stereotypical roles. And low-key, they were actually kind of on the dot with certain cases. For example, you remember how I mentioned, a 3-year-old starving in that box, unfortunately, right? Well, part of the reason that it actually happened was because, it was a teen pregnancy. The father and the mother were both 18. Father wasn't making a lot of money, and he did not take care of the kids. He believed he was a very traditional father, had very traditional like a mindset about what relationships should be, and he was like, no, you got to take care of the kids. That is not my job at all. I'm gonna work and make money and things like that. And so she couldn't bring up a lot of the issues related to the child. For example, how the child had, the daughter, I should say, it was a daughter, she had developmental issues after the dad just violently shook her at the age of 10 months old, and how the daughter had, wasn't able to learn as fast as other kids and just had trouble in school. And that also, again, school is very important, and that can also lead to, again, another level of shame that your kid is not as good as the other kids. And again, that's competitivity in Japan, but again, whole nother can of worms. So this mom, she wasn't able to think straight. She was worried about the financial situation, of the family, and had this things. It's just a lot. You get the idea in general. This mother who was forced into this, and she just couldn't take it. And yeah, misogyny in the East in general, honestly, is a pretty complicated topic. There's a book I'm actually reading about it called Butters. I'm not actually done with it yet, but I'm working on it. It's a pretty big book, but it definitely talks about misogyny. If you're interested, I would highly recommend researching this and reading it. So yeah. Another thing that is kind of not very easy to pin down, because it kind of depends from each case to case, is mental illness and how infanticide can be caused by it. Or, mothers can kill children because they just aren't in the right space and they have a lot of mental illnesses. And, while it could easily cause some of these acts, it's not always the case. Again, sometimes it's like more of a motivator. It's like a side thing that pushes the mother to do this sort of thing. For example, the cardboard box case, the mom couldn't think straight. She had severe anxiety, had depression, and also she was 18, so had a lot of probably work to do. And so, and the dad wasn't doing anything either, and that kind of builds a lot of stress. In general, there's this level of stress in Japan that is constant almost due to the crunch culture and the work culture they have there. Life in Japan is generally very stressful, I hear, and it sometimes can take a mental toll on people who are like constantly having to work. And this could easily be something that is like almost the breeding ground for mental health issues. And I mean, if you look at the suicide rates, unfortunately, sometimes that is the case. I mean, especially in places like Korea, you see it there very often because of how their school system works and how it places so much pressure on teens. And you get where I'm saying. So all in all, it's very possible for mental health to have a factor in like some of these mothers, but it's not really specific to Japan. That is something that happens in general with mothers whenever they kill a child or infant, for postpartum psychosis, things like that. So yeah. And also, if you're a teenage mother, you have school, and school is highly important and very stressful, as I mentioned earlier. So that again could also easily push a mother to kill their child. All right. So coin locker babies are making the news. Child abandonment in general is starting to become something that people are a lot more conscious about during the 70s, 80s, and 90s as these coin locker babies happen. And it's a serious issue during the start of the 90s. Well, what does the government do? Well, they actually acted somewhat quickly, decently, I should say. The Osaka government specifically organized a group dedicated to spreading awareness about child abuse, detecting child abuse, and trying to prevent it in the 80s. They also tried to educate the youth and people in general about contraceptives and stuff, which decreased the amount of unplanned births, but I couldn't really find a graph or statistic or anything to show by how much, but I'm sure it was at least substantial enough to say it probably worked. They in general also tried to spread awareness about coin locker babies, which, due to the publicity, it was already decently well known. And finally, they also had, subways and train stations move coin lockers into more public areas where people could keep an eye on them, and had more patrols kind of come around those areas to see if anyone was doing anything suspicious. However, there are still kind of parts they fumbled on. You see, for example, it's hard for social workers who work inside the, child abuse agency, like the prevention agency, you could say. I don't actually know what it's called, but it's hard for them to actually deal with abuse, and it's because of old laws that are in place. And in addition, social workers who deal with abuse, child abuse, are severely understaffed. Why? Because they get paid nothing and are having constantly work overtime and are overworked. And so people see that and go, I can't make a living off this. I can't help kids and also live at the same time, and I just can't do this job. And so that's the reason that these people who are probably working out of it for passion or just being forced to, just don't have it's just a very inefficient system, and they can't prevent child abuse and can't help people. So it's just very unfortunate. Alright, so how well did all these things that the Osaka government put in place and all of the solutions they tried doing, how well did it all work out? Well, people knew what coin locker babies were, and they just sort of became a lot more rare. Very, very, very few coin locker baby cases really happened after a certain point. Mainly in the 90s is when it really started to cool down, but it still does occasionally happen. For example, in 2022, a 22-year-old woman tried leaving a dead baby in a cooler and then just putting it in a coin locker. I wasn't able to find too much information because a lot of the news agencies were Japanese, so I couldn't really find too much information about it, but it still happens every now and then. And I mean, that's fair. I mean, it really only addressed the public outcry of the coin locker babies and sort of helped with unplanned pregnancies. So, of course it's going to work on the coin locker babies, but what about child abandonment and stuff? It was still really bad, to say the least. I mean, really, really bad. I mean, people weren't doing it in coin lockers anymore, but they just moved on to parks, bathrooms, shopping centers, supermarkets, cardboard boxes, which I mentioned earlier, and bike baskets, that's awful. Just leaving your kid in a bike and then just walking away. They just, sometimes these mothers would literally give birth and then immediately asphyxiate their child and just find a place to hide it. I mean, it was awful. Authorities would sometimes, again, I mentioned this earlier, find the umbilical cord still attached when they find the corpse of the child. So, I remember reading this one case actually where this university student gives birth to a child in a bathroom and immediately kills it and leaves it there. So, child abandonment and abuse is still pretty bad, right? So, someone proposed a solution that could, in theory, work. So, child abandonment in Japan is still pretty bad around this time, right? Despite the fact that they at least tried to do something. Well, the Jikei Hospital in the Kumamoto prefecture decided to present a solution. A baby hatch. A baby hatch is basically where you can anonymously deposit a child, which sounds really bad, but that's essentially what it is. You could deposit them and abandon them and put them into this child care system in the hospital that you deposit them, I guess, at. And you don't have to give away any information, and it is completely anonymous. Similar services exist in European countries such as Germany and Italy. I think there are about 90 in Germany, all around it, so yeah. However, while this baby hatch was made with pure intentions, it caused a lot of debate about ethics, and it kind of sparked a lot of controversy. I mean, in general, baby hatches always seem to spark a debate, and there are plenty of arguments against it. For example, shouldn't a person, an adopted person, be entitled to know who their biological mother is? You see, a lot of people didn't like that fact, and even, the fact that you're just also anonymously abandoning your child in general. So, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was he said he would never forgive someone for abandoning their child using the system. In addition, people argued that rather than actually saving lives, it encourages mothers and parents to actually just, abandon their children more. Now there's a place where you can do it legally. They said, it was a legal solution without having to give away your information either, right? Like, now mothers didn't have to kill a child or, give their information to the hospital and tell them, yeah, I signed my kid up for adoption here. And it didn't help that actually on the first day of the baby hatch opening in the JK hospital, someone dropped off a 3-year-old child, like a full 3-year-old child who could like fully communicate and was like able to talk and things like that. Like, this is a baby hatch, not some kind of like place where you can just drop like kids. This is a backup, not where you can just go back on your mistakes and things like that, right? And another argument that people made was that adopted children, especially ones who will never know their parents, are at a higher risk of mental health issues, addiction, and all these kinds of awful things. And instead of making solutions that would cause more problems, we should focus on the root issue of child abandonment. And that's facts, but in the end, there have been a lot of positives, I would like to say. From the start of the program in 2006 to about 2020, March 2020-ish, they were able to save over 100 children. I think it was about 151 in specific, which, is undeniably better than them having to suffer through abuse, die in a locker, a box, a bathroom stall, and the likes. But in general, if Japan is going to fix its record low birth rates that are only getting lower and the serious issue of child abandonment, they absolutely need to focus on the root cause and fast, because if depopulation kicks in, that is going to be really, really bad for their economy, and it's just going to open up a whole bunch of other issues. This video, I would like to say, was actually, it wasn't a lot of fun to read, but it was still a lot of fun to research. And, despite its depressing nature, it's fascinating to study something that is like a mix of true crime, politics, and social issues all in the same video. And it's just a very interesting thing to research. If you're interested in this subject, please go ahead and learn more. There's so much to this that I hadn't even touched on for the sake of making this all coherent, which I couldn't even do properly. I was studying and I still struggled pronouncing words sometimes. So, sorry about that. But, if you guys are interested, I have articles and websites that I use in the description below. You guys can read through all of them. I know you're gonna see Wikipedia and be like, oh, you use Wikipedia? But I use Wikipedia for resources, so don't shame me, please. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time, where we have definitely a nice change of pace after this one. It's gonna be a nice, happy video. So yeah. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time.